So this is for the blue group for lesson 74 for the homework check. So once you have done the lesson and done the homework, show it to a teacher that you have the homework done before watching the video. And then once you get to each section, watch the video with the explanation on how to do one of the problems and then check the answer, and then you'll get the answers for the rest of the section. If any of your answers don't match for the section, you have to go through and rework the problem, showing your work. Don't just copy down the right answer, and then move on to the next section. And once you've made all of your corrections, show it to a teacher so they can make sure that you followed all the way through, and then you'll be all done. So in order to solve for part 5, they've given us a fraction to start with, but only one number for the fraction to end with. So we need to figure out the fraction that goes in the middle. So when I read the directions, it says to complete the equation to show the fraction of 1 and the equivalent fraction. So, which means that I need to have a fraction that's equal to 1 and to figure out what the fraction is that we're ending with. So it says here that 3 times a number I don't know equals 12. So I can either look at my number chart, or if I can't do the multiplication, 3 times something I don't know, then I have to work backwards and do division. So 12 divided by 3 will give me my number here. So I'm going to copy the problem. And if I do the backwards of division, so 12 divided by 3 equals 4. I know that I'm going to have 4 right here. And since they told us in the instructions that the middle number would be a fraction of 1, we've already learned that if a fraction's bottom number and top number match, then the fraction I'll have here is equal to 1. So I figured out the bottom, and it's true that 3 times 4 equals 12. And now I can work the multiplication straight across the top. So 1 times 4 will equal 4. And what they mean by the equivalent fraction is that if I start with a fraction and then multiply it by something equal to 1, that means that the fraction I'm starting out with and the fraction I'm ending with are equivalent or equal to each other. So if I gave you 1/3 of a pizza, or if I were to give you 4/12 of a pizza, you would be getting the same exact amount of pizza. They would just be cut into different size pieces, but you would get the exact same amount. That's what it means that they're equivalent. So that's how you have to solve this. These boxes in the middle are for your fractions that equal 1. It's not always going to be 4/4. It's going to be whatever other number you solve by. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you these fractions here so that you can check your work. And then what you are going to need to show is that you were able to figure out the fractions here in the middle. So for B, this fraction here should be 63/28. So if you didn't get 63/28, go back and rework your problem until it matches, and you're going to have to figure out what the box here in the middle is equal to. For C, the number that you should have here is 84 over 294. Okay? And then for D, the fraction that you should have is 216 over 360. So if any of your fractions that ended did not match what I got, go back and check to make sure that your fraction in the middle equals 1. Make sure that you went back and you divided. So here would be 84 divided by 2 will get you your top number here. So make sure to ask for help if you have any questions, and then pause the video, check it, and then come back for the next part. So in order to solve for part 6, you have to copy each fraction and then complete the equation to show the mixed number that the fraction equals. So in order to do that, I have to ask myself, how many times does the bottom number go into the top number? How many whole times can it go in? And then that'll be my whole number. And then I'm going to have a fraction after it to show how many left over. So I'm going to be able to get 4 into 10 a few times, but it doesn't go in evenly. So it's going to go in a few times with a little bit left over. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put up on the screen a multiplication chart so I can show you how to walk through the steps. Okay, so I've added the multiplication table to the screen, and what we're going to be doing is we have to figure out how many times 4 can get into 10. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my 4 column, and I'm going to see how close I can get to 10 without going over. So as I'm looking here, okay, 12 is too much, so I'm going to back it up. So that means that the highest I can go is 8, so that means that 4 can go in 2 whole times. So 4, let's say 10/4, it can go in 2 whole times, because what we were able to figure out is that 4 times 2 is as close as I can get to 10 without going over. So 4 times 2 gets us to 8, but we didn't want to get to 8, we wanted to get to 10. So that's when I need to count that I was able to get to 8 plus how many in order to get to 10. So 8, 9, 10. So I needed to add 2 more because I was able to get to 8, but I need to get 2 more to get to 10. And then my bottom number always stays the same. So that means that my mixed number, which means that I have a whole number and a fraction together, means that 10 divided by 4, or 10/4, is equal to 2 and 2/4. It was able to go in 2 whole times with 2 left over, guys. Okay, it's the same thing for B. If I'm looking at my 9s, I need to figure out how close I can get to 60 without going over. So if I'm looking at my 9s, I'm going down, I'm seeing, okay, 63 is too big. So this is the closest that I can get. To 54 is the closest, which means that it can go in 6 times. So for B, it can go in 6 times, and I can see here that 9 times 6 is 54, but I didn't want 54, I wanted 60, so I have to count up from 54 to 60, so 54, 55, 56, 57, 58, 59, 60. So that means that I'm going to have to count up 6 more times, and my bottom number is going to stay the same. So for B, you should have 6 and 6/9. For C, you should have 1 and 1/7. And for D, you should have 5 and 1/4. So go ahead and check to make sure that you have the correct answers. And if you're not sure how to do these, go back and try and rework the problem again. Use your multiplication table here to see where you may have gone wrong, and then come back for the next part. Okay, so for these are straight multiplication and division problems, so I'm just going to go ahead and enter in the answers for each section that's here, but make sure that you check to understand what you did wrong, and if any of these are tricky for you still, make sure that you are practicing your multiplication and your division facts. Okay, so here I've added all of the answers for the multiplication and division, so pause the video to check your work, and once you've done that, come back for the next part. So for this part, part 8, what we're given is we're given a fraction number family, but they gave us a whole number of 1. They didn't give us a fraction for the big number. So what we have to do is change the whole number of 1 into a fraction, and so that we can figure out the missing fraction that's here. So in order to solve for number 1, what we know about number families is all of the bottom numbers have to be the same. So if I wanted to make a fraction out of the number 1, I know that the bottom number here has to match the bottom number here. So I already know that my bottom number for number 1 is going to be 55. And since I also know that this fraction has to equal 1, then the bottom number and the top number are going to have to match. So now I've changed my number 1 into a fraction of 55/55. And so already for my missing fraction here, if I know that the bottom numbers for fraction number families have to match all the way across, I know my bottom number is 55. And then I work the top just like I would a regular number family. So if I do 55 minus 36, because we're missing a small number, so we have to subtract, the number that I'm missing is 19. Okay? The number that you should have for B, the one that you should have right here, is 1784. So if you didn't get 1784, go back to check to make sure that the fraction you wrote for number 1 is correct, and make sure that your subtraction here was correct. For C, the fraction that's missing should be 228 over 635. And again, if that's not the fraction that you got for C, check your whole number. Your number 1 was done correctly, and make sure that your subtraction was also done correctly. So pause the video to check your work, and then when you're done, come back for part 9. So this is a review of something that we did a long time ago. So what we're going to do is, we know that we can write whole numbers on number lines, or we can write fractions for whole numbers on number lines. So when we're writing in the fraction, we already know on number lines that the bottom number for each of these has to be the same. So I can go ahead and start writing my fractions, because I know that all of them are going to have a bottom number of 73. And now that I've done that, I know that in order to get the top number for the fraction, I do the bottom number times this whole number to figure out the top. So if I did 73 times 1, I would get 73. And that makes sense, because as we've already talked about today, if a fraction equals 1, the top number and bottom number should match. In order to find it for number 2, it should be 73 times 2 will equal my top number. So the number that you should have on top here is 146. For this number is 219. And for 4, you should have 292. Oops, that's a 2. And the top is 365. So pause, make sure that you have the correct information written down, and then we'll move on to part 10. So in part 10, the instructions say to figure out the area of the rectangle. And so in order to figure out the area, I know that I take my 2 numbers and I multiply them. So for A, I should do 37 times 1, and that's going to give me 7 times 1 is 7, 1 times 3 is 3. But I'm not done, because when I do area, I know that I need units. So here we're working with inches, and when we do area, we have to make them into square inches. So you always have to make sure you have your unit, or it won't be a complete answer. So for B, we have to take our 2 numbers and multiply them. So I'm going to do 50 times 38. And I know here that I'm going to get 0 times 8 is 0. I'm actually going to erase it and move it up higher so we have enough room. So I'm going to do 38 times 50. So 0 times 8 is 0. 0 times 3 is 0. Second row always gets a 0. So now I'm on 5 times 8. 5 times 8 is 40. And now I'm on 5 times 3 is 15. Plus the 4 I carried, so 15 plus 4 is 19. And when I add those together, I get 1900. And like I just said, for area, we need to make sure we have our units. So here we started with meters, But so once we did area, they change into square meters. So SQ and then an M. So make sure that you understand that you have to, area is multiplying, and that also you have your correct unit once you finish solving the problem. So pause here to make any corrections that you might need, and then come back for the next part. So for this part, for part 11, this is very important that you would read the instructions. So the instructions say to copy each of the problems and then work the division problem and write the missing number in the multiplication problem. So if I just went through and solved the multiplication, I haven't fully completed the problem, because in order to have a complete answer, you need the multiplication and the division. So for A, we're starting out with 3 times a number I don't know is equal to 180. And in order to solve that, I need to work a division problem, because I don't know what number is here, so I have to do the opposite. It's the same thing we did at the beginning of the assignment with the equivalent fractions, that if I can't do 3 times some number I don't know what I'm multiplying by, so that means that I'm going to do backwards, the division. 180 divided by 3. So I'm going to put that in there, 180 divided by 3. And what I'm going to work on here is, can 3 go into 1? 3 cannot go into 1. It's not big enough. So that means I'm going to have to put 3 into 18. So I know that 3 times some number can get me into 18. I know 3 can go into 18 6 times. What it's showing me is that 3 times 6 will get me 18. Now, can 3 go into 0? No, 0 is not big enough, so I can't put it in there. So whenever I can't do it, I'm going to put a 0. So now that I've solved my division problem and I have the answer to the division problem, I'm going to put the same answer into my multiplication problem. Because whether I say 3 times 60 equals 180 is the same thing as if I did 180 divided by 3 equals 60. So it's kind of the same that when you do the multiplication forwards or you do the division the opposite way, the answer for both will be exactly the same. So for B, your answer will be 210. For C, you'll have 61. And for D, you'll have 707. So I didn't set up these problems for you, because once you have this answer, you should be able to go back and set up both problems just like I did. So pause the video, check your work right here. Once you're done with part 11, you have to show a teacher that your assignment has been totally corrected, and we'll see if there's any other parts that we need to work on. So go ahead and let a teacher know once you're done with this section.